Hello, and welcome back to Me Time. I'm your host, Megan, and today we're going to be discussing applying for nurse practitioner jobs and ways that you can increase your likelihood of getting that second or third interview or even that job offer when you're applying from out of state or further away. Now, this is a generalized discussion. This is not for any one particular geographic location, mainly because this is a common thing that's happening these days. No longer are people staying in one spot. People are oftentimes moving. Some people are even moving to go to school. And so you're completing your graduate program in a different state than you may have lived in, or even doing practicum in a different state than you're even going to be living and working in. So, especially for the career of nursing in general, it's a very transient field. People are often moving. We are in a high demand position so that we have it is easy for us to even move sometimes to another state to live and to work. So, we're going to be talking about tips that you can focus on specifically for new graduates just applying from your program and also for regular APRNs that are looking to relocate. So, we're going to be specifically talking about 5 tips that I think could be helpful, and I'm going to expand on each one of them a little bit. So, the first one is pretty obvious, but you want to make sure that your resume is up to date. Make sure your CV looks great. Make sure there's up-to-date information, that it's been updated, that you get rid of old information that you don't think is pertinent anymore, that you gear it towards the job that you're applying for. If you're applying to a specialty job, make sure you tweak your CV so that it can reflect that as well. This needs to be ready to go, because if you reach out to your network and there's a job opening and someone asks you to send your CV, you want to be able to do it right away and not have any time wasted. It is very difficult to always update your CV constantly. I think it is a good reminder, though, to every couple of months do a check in and say, hey, I'm not looking for a job, but make sure that my CV is up to date and ready to go. That way, it doesn't take a whole day or your whole day off or a couple hours trying to update it. You can kind of just always have it updated every few months and tweaking it just a little bit. You can even have different versions, and I recommend that as well. Have a version geared towards more specialty or more generalized, a little bit more fancy, whatever you want to do, just make sure you have one. Oftentimes I get asked, like, do we need a cover letter? Is that even a thing anymore? Personally, I find that I haven't had to give many cover letters when I'm applying for positions. I do think it's worth your time to have a very brief, generalized cover letter ready to go so that you can just insert a few things here and there that you need to change. Do not stress yourself out about a cover letter. I think it can be helpful if you're applying for a position, especially out of state. You can kind of add some personal notes in there or reasons why you're specifically applying to a particular program. If it's a residency program you're trying to apply to, then probably the cover letter holds a little bit more weight. But have something generalized so that if you have to submit one, you're not scrambling or stressing out about this as well. I also think that it can be a good way to highlight some experience that's maybe not on your CV, or maybe something you do outside of work that you're proud of that you think could be helpful in having you get that position at the end of the day. So that's something that could be helpful as well. So one, make sure your CV is up to date and have a generalized cover letter. Don't stress out about it, but have something that you're proud of. So that's number one. Number 2 is licensing. So licensing, you would think, is pretty straightforward, but as a new grad, it can be kind of complicated when you're waiting for timelines to occur. So for example, you graduated your program, you're waiting to take your boards, and that's going to be in a couple of weeks, and then you have to apply for your APRN license in that state. So overall, if you don't have a license, if you're moving to a new state and you don't have an RN license in that state, at least get your RN license in that state just to help you get that process moving. Because sometimes between sitting for the boards and waiting to be approved to take your boards can take some time. And then getting your results, sometimes depending on the type of test you're taking, can take some time to get those test results as well. So this can be a drawn out process. So the more you can do ahead of time to kind of speed the process along, the better off you're going to be. If you're specifically applying to a state that's going to take some time, definitely get this RN license while you're even in your graduate program so things are ready to go as soon as you take your boards and you pass, and then you can apply for your APRN license. If you're an experienced APRN and you're switching jobs or moving states or moving cross country, so important. I would say go ahead and get that APRN license now. Get it before you even start applying if you can. It's going to show employers that you're serious about getting a job, you've paid for it. They might think that you already live in that location and may not kind of filter you out as not a good applicant, especially if they don't know that you don't live there. Hopefully you'll get an interview. So maybe sometimes that can be helpful. Obviously, be transparent. They're going to find that out anyways, but hopefully it'll get you through that initial process. If you're hoping to get reimbursed for your license and that is what's holding you up, oftentimes you still can get reimbursement on the tail end of things or use maybe CME money. It just totally depends on your employer, but it is something that's just worth it to get. So you have it so that it does not slow you down. As an employer, they're going to want to see that you have a license already. So there's not going to be a delay from the time that you apply to accepting the position for you starting day one on the job, because we all know that can take time depending on the state. So kind of goes without saying, but get your license first. It just simplifies things and also makes you a better candidate when you're applying, especially if they really like you and like somebody else that has equal experience, but they already have their license. They know they're going to be able to start maybe even a whole month earlier. That's a big deal. So think about that, especially if employers are on a time crunch. So get your license. So to review, CV, resume, number one. Number two, make sure you have your licensure. So you have those things down, and now you're thinking about where you geographically want to go. Again, this is not specific for any one geographic location, but it is important to know or have an idea of what geographic location you want to move to. Once you know what that location is, I would think about your network. So specifically think, do I know anybody? Do I know any RNs or APRNs or physicians or PAs or professors that know somebody that lives in that location that I personally know that I can personally reach out to and connect with? That is the easiest way to get your job, is networking. If you have a strong network or utilize your networking tools, you don't have to rely so heavily on job boards. Obviously, we all look at job boards and that can be very helpful, but relying on your network can oftentimes get you a job that isn't even posted. So once you have your list of people that you know in that network that live in that area that you can personally reach out to, craft an email and reach out to them or call them or text them, whatever you're comfortable doing. Have your CV ready so you can send that along with it too if you need to. Say you don't really know anybody in your network and your personal network that you know lives and works in that state. That's okay. That doesn't mean that you can't utilize networking skills. Next, I would go to your friends. Do your friends know anybody that works there? Do your colleagues know anyone that works in that state? Do your preceptor that you worked with during your program know somebody that lives and works in that state that they can connect you with? I would also reach out to your if you're in school and graduating or an alumni, a recent alumni, look at your alumni network. That is one of the easiest ways to find other nurse practitioners that are living and working in a state. And oftentimes they're really receptive to students when they reach out and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. I would like to connect with you. Just want to hear more about the location and your experience. And that is a great way because they might even have a job opening that they can recommend you for or talk about a residency program that they really liked. So that is super helpful. I would even reach out to your professors if you're not having luck with the alumni network. Not a lot of people are always active in the alumni network. It just kind of depends on your university and how strong that networking is. But I also reached out to my professors and said, hey, just curious, I'm moving to this location. Do you know anybody from our previous programs that work and lives in the state? And I ended up being able to network through that as well. And I had a few people that were living in the location geographically that I was planning on moving to. So that can be very helpful. So if you don't have personal contacts, reach out to your professional network contacts. And then I would also think about professional organizations. They have a lot of job posts and networking opportunities. They even have state and local professional organizations, which can be helpful as well. And then, of course, there's something like LinkedIn. You can definitely utilize LinkedIn. That can be a hit or miss. Of course, LinkedIn, you can message people or even search directly about to see who works, maybe even at the location you want to work at or the organization you might want to work for. Sometimes there's even more casual organizations like Facebook groups, specifically for nurse practitioners in a certain location. You could also possibly network through that as well. There's pros and cons to everything, but utilize all of your resources. Don't feel defeated if one of them is not helpful. Networking is important. We forget how important networking is, or at least I did when I was an RN, because it's so natural. When you're an RN, you're constantly networking. You're networking on your floor. You get to know your colleagues. You get to work with the providers directly, specialty providers directly. You float to another floor and you get to know a whole new floor of nurses. You have travel nurses that are coming in that you're networking with as well. So it's a very natural way to network. But when you graduate nurse practitioner school and now you are in the workforce as a nurse practitioner, it can be very isolating. You tend to be in your pod. So it is difficult to network sometimes once you become a nurse practitioner. So do not forget those skills, and also rely on your old network to help you in the future. But try to stay active within professional organizations as well, or locally with your other nurse practitioners that work in the same state as you, because that can be helpful for you in the future. So think more about networking probably when you're an advanced practice nurse. It's always important no matter what, but remember to continuously build that even after you graduate. So continuously think. So to review, resume, number 1, or your CV. Number 2, you want to make sure that you have your license. That goes without saying. Number 3, you want to make sure you're strongly relying on your network and using that predominantly to help you hopefully look for a job. Number 4, once you have an idea of where you're moving to, you're working on your network, you want to also formulate your why. So tell your why. You want to know why you're moving there. Now it's quite common for nurse practitioners to be moving. This is not something that's new. This is not just something unique to our field, but I do feel like our field more so than ever moves quite a bit. Figure out an articulate way to say how and why you are moving somewhere. That can be very helpful for employers. If you can articulate why you are moving, you make it sound very convincing. You make it seem like it is definitive. You are moving there. You have a moving date. You're moving for a reason. Employers like to hear that. There's going to be a higher chance that hopefully you if you have a moving date, they feel like, okay, this candidate's definitely coming. There's less risk. If you're applying and you're just saying, oh, I kind of like the area, I want to move there. Okay, well, do you have a move date yet? No, I don't have a move date. I wanted to get a job first. They're going to think, okay, is this candidate really serious? I mean, maybe not always, but having some of these hard stops in, like telling your why, having a move date, having a reason why you're moving, you and your family's moving there, you're moving closer to family and friends, bring in hobbies that you're doing, know about the culture of the location. Hopefully you would have visited the location already. Make sure that's happening, because in the first round interviews and the initial interview, usually with HR, they're going to be asking some of those questions anyways to see, okay, do you know anything about our area? Are you serious about moving here? Is it, and then do you have a move date? Also, obviously know about know your location as far as like how much is cost of living? What is the average nurse practitioner salary? I would actually, when you're networking, definitely ask your colleagues or your friends, how much are you making? What did you make when you started out? Because that's also going to give you an idea of what can you expect. And also, if you do get a job offer, you already kind of have an idea what other NPs with similar experience or with more experience are making in the area or within your specialty. And that way you already have that. So you're not scrambling once you have the offer to reach out to everybody to ask, hey, how does this compare to what you're making? What are some tools you had to help negotiate? So that would be a good conversation to also have when you're reaching out to your network at the beginning. So tell your why, know your why, be articulate about it, and be very convincing, because that can be very helpful. And lastly, when you're applying for job positions and maybe you've already made it through the first, second, or third interview and you have an opportunity to do a site visit, if possible, I would definitely do a site visit. Site visits are wonderful. If an employer says, hey, we'd love to come meet you in person, what do you think about flying out or driving out to this location? Say yes. Take this opportunity if you can. If you have if you have the availability to do it, it can be very helpful because it can be intimidating to accept a position from far away. If you don't really know much about the organization, if you've never been there before, it just helps ease your mind as well and maybe helps you accept a job offer itself. So I know during COVID, things were a little bit different. You couldn't always travel to visit, but if you can oftentimes companies will even pay for you to come out. They'll pay for your flight. They'll pay for mileage. They'll help you get an overnight stay, mainly so that they can interview you more, but also make sure that you really like the location too. Because if you don't like the organization, you're not getting it's also your opportunity to interview them. So that's super important too. So remember, you're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. You're also assessing the scene, seeing if people are generally happy. Can you picture yourself working here? You can kind of check out the locations of where you might want to live as well. So site visits can be very helpful. If you have a job offer, but you don't get a site visit or they don't ask you to do a site visit, which sometimes can happen too, they might not have the resource. You ask for one. They might not have the resources to say, hey, or they might say, yes, you can come do a site visit, but we cannot offer you compensation for coming out for that site visit. But then it's up to you. You can say, okay, do I have time and the funds to go out and do a site visit? And if you do, I would highly recommend doing a site visit. And it's kind of fun to kind of also see the area where your future where you hopefully are going to be living and working in as well. So if they don't offer you a site visit, you could maybe ask for like another interview or to talk to maybe somebody else on the team that you haven't talked to yet, or even maybe reach out if you have a connection, have a chat on the side with that person, maybe outside of a professional interview process. So those things can be helpful as well. So just to review, you have your CV and your resume. Make sure you get that ready to go. Licensure, that goes without saying yet again, get your license in that state before you apply if possible, especially if you are a advanced practice registered nurse that's already been practicing. 3, utilize your network heavily. Really focus on networking. Reach out as much as possible because that often gets you jobs more than even looking at job boards and applying on job boards. Number 4, tell your why in an articulate way. Better than I just said it. So be able to speak about why you are moving and sound very convincing about your move. And then number 5, I would highly recommend doing a site visit. It can be very helpful not only for the employer, but for you because you are also interviewing them and you have to be comfortable with accepting that position as well. And that can be helpful when you're making your final decision. So I hope you found this helpful. I can definitely speak more to the more new grad nurse practitioner versus the experienced APRN, and hopefully more videos will come about this topic in the future. We'll see you next time on To Me Time.